Welcome to another episode of the Miami Herald's Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm your host, Miami Dolphins columnist Omar Kelly, here to give you the report on day 2 of Miami Dolphins training camp. And I'm joined by Barry Jackson, the man, the myth, the legend. Barry, today I was a little confused. I went into day 2 of training camp fully expecting Tua Tagovailoa to go through the paces, maybe throw individuals, maybe throw 7-on-7s. And what I discovered was a Tua with his hands in his pocket and a non-participant standing out there, even holding the micro, the walkie-talkie to hear what the plays are being called into the quarterback. But a non-participating Tua. Now, whether that was injury, doubtful. Contract, more than likely. Old veteran rest day, he's 26. I don't know. What do you make of this, Barry? Day 2, no Tua.
I think it's all very silly. I think it's all pointless. I think it's all counterproductive. Just this whole notion of Tua needing to sit out to remind the Dolphins what they're missing without him seems crazy to me. They know already that there's an appreciable drop, a drop that would throw them out of postseason contention if they start Mike White or anyone this season other than Tua. So to me, there's no point to be proven. I understand this is Tua's only recourse, his only avenue that would not subject him to NFL fines to get the Dolphins' attention. But to me, I simply don't see the Dolphins saying, you know what? Let's give him tens millions more in guarantees just because now we have even more evidence that Mike White isn't as good as Tua. They knew that already. I got news for you. So I don't know what it's accomplishing. I know you think it's a good strategy. I totally get that. I just don't know how that bridges what has been reported as a significant gap between the parties. How does this motivate the Dolphins to suddenly become more comfortable in giving him guaranteed money at a much larger volume without an out clause? Explain that to me.
You know what? It's the last bullet in your chamber. Are you supposed to shoot it or just leave it there? And we've always talked about this being the soft of the first of 3 deadlines. The start of training camp, you knew what it was. I think the second deadline is probably going to be the start of maybe the exhibition season, if not joint practices. Because for Tua, I think the joint practices are far more important than the exhibition season. Because joint practices, he can wear his red jersey and nobody's going to touch him. In an exhibition season, all bets are off. He's in danger. So maybe it's the beginning of that week where they're engaging in their first joint practice with the Atlanta Falcons. And then the third deadline is the start of the regular season. And Chris Greer oftentimes, generally gets a deal done with his impending free agents. That break between 53-man rosters are assembled, and here's our beginning of preparation for the regular season. So we passed the first deadline, and Tua yesterday did a soft hold-in by participating in 2 snaps of 11-on-11s, and his agent probably said, what are you doing? We are trying to get a message across here that we are not participating in practice, and here you are participating in practice. Tomorrow
exactly.
You will do nothing.
And then maybe you won't even leave the parking lot on Saturday or on Friday. How about that? So I tweeted this a little while ago. To me, the Dolphins should do one of 2 things. They either should talk to Ryan Williams, his agent from Athletes First, about setting a deadline and saying, look, it is ridiculous for this to just drag on.
What do you need a deadline for? We've had 5 months.
I know. But how about setting a deadline and saying both parties are either going to get a deal done now or we're going to table discussions, see if the Dolphins are willing to do that. Set it for a week from now, 2 weeks from now, whenever you want, but just set a deadline to manufacture pressure for both parties. Here's the other thing that they could do. Tell Tua, look, we love you. We want you as our long-term quarterback, but we have irreconcilable differences on the guaranteed money that we are comfortable paying a player who's had a history of injuries. We simply cannot see eye to eye on this, even though it's 2 reasonable people trying to strike a deal. We simply cannot strike a deal at this time. We're going to ask you to play this year out on the $23.2 million fifth-year option. We'll revisit it next offseason. That, to me, puts the onus on Tua to come up with a long-term strategy. Because if the Dolphins establish that with Tua, then Tua just can't simply sit out 11 on 11. What's that going to accomplish? At that point, he needs a long-term strategy that he and Ryan Williams must determine, whether it's him sitting out, whether it's him doing something that I just don't see Tua doing, which is that fake injury thing. I think Tua is too good a guy to say, oh, my clavicle hurts, my ankle hurts, I have a hangnail, I can't throw for 2.5 weeks, I have an earache. I don't see Tua doing that and stringing the Dolphins along all season with make-believe injuries. So to me, you do one of those two things, because that the first one sets a deadline, which either results in the deal or it doesn't. The second one puts the onus on Tua to have the knowledge that, look, we're just not going to be able to get something done this season. And then Tua will have to decide, do I be a good sport and play nonetheless, or do I come up with some make-believe injury that I don't see Tua doing? To me, if the Dolphins were straight with him and said, look, we just don't see eye to eye on this contract, I think Tua would be professional enough to go into this season determined to have a good season and to put himself in the best bargaining position, period, unless he were talked out of that approach by his agent or his family, which is quite possible. So how about those two ideas for you?
War on me. If you've now told me we're not comfortable giving you a deal and we're going to go into this with you, we're asking you to play on the fifth-year option, you've just waged war. We are now
I'm not saying I'm not comfortable giving you a deal. I'm saying I don't believe that the sides can reach an agreement based on 6 months of fruitless negotiations. That's different from saying I don't think we want to give you a deal. It's just more nuanced than saying, look, we're just not going to be able to reach a deal. It's become abundantly clear in 6 months of negotiations.
Barry, if you're, and we're giving you hypothetical numbers now, but if you're offering me $110, $120 million in guaranteed money, and people know me, they know I only count the guaranteed money, and I want $140 million in guaranteed money, $20 million is not a small gap. And you could argue it one way or the other. You know, people are obsessed about how long will this deal be, and I've come out and I've said with conviction, it's not going to be a 7-year deal, because just because Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert signed 7 and Trevor Lawrence signed 7-year deals going into the final year of their rookie season, not their 5th-year option, it's a different ball game. These are different years. These are different contract terms. So at the max, Tua signing a 6-year deal. If I'm Miami, I'm probably targeting a 5-year deal. 3 years of it will be guaranteed. So we're really sitting here haggling about how much are you paying him in real money per year, and then how much of that money is guaranteed. So, you know, hypothetically, let's say they're at 110, 120, Tua wants 140. That's a huge cavern to close. And as players said today, this isn't like a regular negotiation. I think maybe only Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can kind of relate to what Tua is going on and understand that both of them have forced their way out of their situations, with Jalen Waddle getting traded from Jacksonville so he can get his $100 million deal, and Tyreek Hill getting traded from Kansas City so he can get his $100 million deal. I don't think we're going to see Tua try to force the issue of getting a trade, because realistically, I don't think those are cards that he can play, because at this point, every team has its quarterback. Every quarterback is, every team is going into their situation. And realistically, and this was what favors the Dolphins, what would the market for Tua be? What are there, 4 or 5 teams that would be interested in Tua? And that's just interested. That's not necessarily paying him top dollar for his employment. So that's not the right card to play. But Tua wants to be taken care of. And unfortunately, he's in this position where his deal is going to reflect well or poorly on his agency. And I think that that's more of an issue than it is how much money Tua makes.
I totally agree. To me, he should be open to taking a below-market deal simply because of the history of concussions. This gives him generational wealth for his family.
Would you tell Jimmy Butler to take a below-market deal just because he didn't play, a significant?
Because of the head injuries, Omar. Because of the head injuries. Why would you want to risk the possibility of having another concussion, knowing he's had a history of them, and then ending up with nothing beyond Obviously, $23 million is a lot of money. I just don't understand the thinking there. All that being said, it's Tua's decision. I don't want to be too judgmental because Tua has to decide what he's comfortable doing. But I don't understand why this has to be such an issue when Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott have both gone beyond the point in terms of length of negotiations with a team than Tua has. For Tua, this has only been going on this offseason. I realize I could have given him a deal last offseason like Joe Burrow got, but to me, this hasn't gone as long as it did with Lamar Jackson before he got his deal, certainly not with Prescott. So why does Tua have to be taken care of now when those players weren't taken care of at the same time?
Okay, Lamar skipped all of his team's offseason program when he was asked to play on the fifth-year option. Then when he was given the franchise tag and nobody made an offer, which I think is the dumbest thing ever in NFL history, he demanded a trade, and he wanted out. And eventually they got a deal done. And as I continue to point out to people, it's still the best deal in the NFL for a quarterback, even though his mama got it for him. And then Dak Prescott. Okay, Dak Prescott played on the franchise tag. Okay, the franchise tag is a lot different than the fifth-year option. Name me the last quarterback outside of Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield are the last two quarterbacks that played on their fifth-year option. And I don't think it's fair to compare Tua to either of those guys because Baker played on three teams, was on three teams in 1 year when he was playing on that fifth-year option. And then Lamar Jackson, MVP, two-time MVP. I'm not putting Tua in the comparison there. The problem that I have, and I've written this in the Miami Herald, is the Dolphins are banking on the fact that they know Tua is too nice of a guy.
Right.
And Tua is too compromising of a guy. And at some point, even Tyreek said it, he's too competitive to sit there and watch practice and hold out and not participate. So it'll be interesting to see how long this dance goes. But what I can tell you is, while they practice without Tua Tagovailoa participating in 11-on-11s, while the offense had some good moments, Alec Ingold had a 60-yard touchdown off a broken coverage from Cam Smith and whoever was the safety back there. I'm not going to call names because I didn't see specifically who it was. And there were some other respectable plays from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Offense looked anemic. Now, is this what I expect from a Mike White offense? Skylar Thompson offense? Absolutely. The first day, Gavin, I don't even know his name.
Gavin Hardison. A rare quarterback off Tommy John surgery, of all things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never really felt a need to learn his name. However, the first day, I'm going to throw that out because I'm sorry, Gavin shouldn't be throwing the ball 30 times in a practice. But day two was a lot of Mike White action, a lot of Skylar Thompson. Now, clearly, this is a defense that they're still trying to get a grasp of and trying to understand where's the pressure coming, where the disguise is coming. And there are no pads, so a lot of the defensive linemen feel like they have the offensive linemen feel like the defensive linemen have an edge. I hear that every year. When they don't have pads on, offensive linemen, it's hard to block these guys because, one, you can't be too violent, and two, you got nothing to hold on to. And I did see Patrick Paul holding a couple of times. So this is, I had to put him in my stock down. I'm sorry. When you're a second-round pick, the stakes are a lot higher. We know where you are, and we know what you're expected to be. I'm going to need you not to false start and not to hold. But offense does not look good, Barry. Does that surprise you at all?
Not remotely. Mike White is what he is. He is a marginal NFL backup, and I say that hesitatingly because A, he's a hell of a nice fellow, and B, he had some really good games in his pro career against Cincinnati, against Chicago, and he was with the Jets. So he's capable of very good moments. But you also know you're going to get inconsistency. You're going to get interceptions like we saw in a game last year and like we saw today in terms of Elijah Campbell having an interception. So we know with Mike White as a starting quarterback, it's likely going to be a sub-500 team. I don't think anyone expects it to get to that point with Tua sitting out. So no, they cannot win without Tua starting. White, to me, was always a bit of a questionable choice as a backup quarterback because I thought there were better options out there like Minshew and others last offseason, but they love his intelligence. They love his grasp of the system. They love the fact that he's reliable, that he's a team guy, that he wasn't going to be an emotional threat to Tua, right? So all of these things, I guess, made him the ideal backup in their eyes.
Yeah.
As far as the rest of the group, as you noted, Teron Armstead not there. Not that you can judge offensive line play at this point without pads, as you said. Receivers, you've so far, as you've indicated in your practice reports, it's been about what you would expect. Tyreek Hill with a great catch today to end practice, as you reported, over Ethan Bonner, who had good coverage. As Ukama made a catch yesterday, Waddle's have been good. Craycraft got open for a catch today. So you're seeing what you expect at receiver. At running back, we know what they have. We know their top three plus Jeff Wilson is a very, very good group. Chris Brooks, to me, is an interesting story. I know he had the fumble today. He didn't work yesterday. But to me, we saw enough flashes last year, Omar, where I want to hold on to this guy. And I know Ahmed obviously is reliable for special teams and other reasons. He's been around. He knows the system. But Brooks showed a burst last year to me that I would be not quick to give up on. I think he's worth investing more time in. But obviously, he's got to prove on the field he's capable of it. What struck out to you so far at tight end? Haven't seen much of Fort based on your reports so far, but Tanner Connor, who was put in mothballs last year, we barely saw him at all. He was.
Man, oh, you know what? I totally downgraded. There was a Tanner Connor run after catch play. I couldn't tell if the play would have been stopped by the defenders, but he outran a safety and a cornerback, or
He's
maybe it was a linebacker and a safety. And I was just like, wow, this guy's fast.
It's sneaky speed, as they say.
And to explain to people, they're working on the far field, so you have to watch things with binoculars. You can't really see the end, where the out of bounds marker is. But whenever defenders trail you all the way to the end zone, they realize, oh, we screwed up. We got to go stop him because this is on film. Jonnu Smith didn't practice today. And he had been a limited guy during the offseason program. He had participated in mini camps, practiced yesterday, didn't practice today. And, right now the team does not have to give you an injury report, and they will not give you an injury report. And players are fine for talking about their injuries. So you got to kind of play the guessing game on what's going on. But maybe Jonnu Smith is in the old guy program that seems to be taking place right now, which I did want to address, because if we're going to talk about this Dolphins team, what does it always come down to?
Health.
How will they
and December?
How will they perform in December and January in their health? Okay, I wrote this in the Miami Herald, and it's in fact increased. They've got 13 players over 30 on this team. And yesterday, and I know I wrote a column and my peers criticized me. They're like, it's day one, but I'm sorry. I have a very lofty and high opinion of Calais Campbell, and you know this. The world knows this. I covered him when he was a tight end recruit at the University of Miami. I go back decades with Calais Campbell. I know what kind of athlete he is. And what I saw yesterday was not the athlete that I expected. And I get it. He's 37. Maybe he's pacing himself. Hell, Mike McDaniel probably realizes, hey, this guy needs a day off, a day after practicing. And if this gets you to play at the level that you played with the Atlanta Falcons last year, I don't care what you do. And that's just like Teron Armstead. I know exactly what I'm going to get from Teron Armstead when we unwrap the bubble wrap and finally put him there at left tackle and have him actually protect the quarterback and open up running lanes. I don't care. I don't need to see Teron Armstead participate in one single snap of training camp, because I want him healthy and I want him fresh and I want him to have fresh legs. Teron, I don't know, because yesterday was my first look at it and I was like, oh, this is not what I expected.
He's 37.
I know. I'm 47. I know my body hurts. I totally understand and I totally get it. Maybe he did not participate in any of the offseason program, did not participate in minicamp. Training camp is probably his opportunity to get himself in shape and get in football shape. I get it. You're 37. Like you are a 17-year NFL veteran, but understand that I expect him to anchor this defensive line. You're talking about an all-decade player. You're talking about a Hall of Fame player. You're talking about one of the best edge setters in the NFL in history. You need him. Give me your other option, Barry. Who else?
Yeah. I mean, it's a disaster if Calais Campbell is not at least a good player this year. It's an absolute debacle. I told you yesterday, and I want to add a little nuance to this, that I wasn't concerned about defensive tackle. That was based on the very important caveat that Calais Campbell is who he has been throughout his career, and that Teair Tart is who he was in Tennessee in 2022. Not the guy who upset Mike Vrabel in 2023. So to me, if those two things happen, then I think their defensive tackle situation is going to be okay. If those two things don't happen, it's going to be a total disaster. And we can sit here all year saying, why the hell didn't they re-sign Christian Wilkins and give him what he wanted and treated him like the core player that he was? So to me, Campbell's play, I would say this, Omar. Defensively, Campbell's play and Jalen Ramsey's availability, my God, he has to stay healthy. Those are the two most important things on this defense, along with obviously Chubb and Phillips getting back healthy and being what they were. But to me, those are by far the most important things on this defense. If you lose Ramsey, you're totally screwed. If Calais Campbell is not what he was, at least the last few years, I'm not saying vintage Calais Campbell 2017, but he's got to at least be a good NFL starter. If he's not that, if he's ready to fall off a cliff, and we're not saying he is, but if he is about to fall off a cliff at 37, they are in a world of hurt.
Yes, no, I agree with you. Calais had a day off today. Hey, and I support the Mike McDaniel old guy program. I fully do, because Mike is a big believer in sports science. Why does a 37-year-old veteran who probably knows more football than the guy who's coaching him, and probably more than his defensive coordinator, no offense to Anthony Weaver,
Austin Clark was a heck of a coach.
No offense to anybody.
Right.
Why does he need to practice every day during training camp in August? So Jonnu Smith, Kendall Fuller. Now, the only question, Jordan Poyer did not practice. The only concern I have with this is, and this is about not putting unnecessary mileage on these 30-year-old legs and these 30-year-old bodies. I get this, but will this lead to the young players elevating their level of play, or will this lead to lack of chemistry developing for a team? Here's the one thing. Elijah Campbell, and I have a high opinion of Elijah Campbell more than most people, because before he suffered his knee injury, I remember talking to who's the secondary coach last year? Former Dolphins safety. Ronaldo Hill.
I remember the corner coach and Ronaldo Hill.
I remember talking to Ronaldo Hill, and Ronaldo Hill basically said, hey, do not discount Elijah Campbell, because right now I'd probably say he's the front runner to start opposite Holland. Then the guy suffers a knee injury, and then it changed the landscape. He played well today. I don't know if he was part of the Alec Ingold bust, but he played well today, and he made plays, and he pulled down an interception. So, yes, that's one instance where a young player elevated himself. Would have loved for it to be Marcus May, but maybe he doesn't know the defense at this present moment. But then you've got other instances where, hey, Jonnu Smith, and I know Tua's not out there, but don't they need to develop some level of chemistry?
Well, that's the problem, obviously, with Tua not doing 11-on-11 work. That's where it could hurt the team this year. And again, he's got every right to do it. I just think he's biting his nose to spite his face. It's not going to accomplish anything. Now, I will say this.
You got to take a stand, Barry. At some point, you got to take a stand.
I know. And for people who have just arrived from the Indian Ocean or from Iceland who aren't familiar with my work and our podcast, I want to say I'm not a player hater. I love Tua as a person. I think he's a good quarterback. I ranked him 8th among NFL quarterbacks, higher than most people on earth. So
put a number on it, Barry. Put a number on what you would give him. Since you're not a player hater, put a number on what you would give him per year. 3 years guaranteed.
I would offer him a very low guarantee and a per year average in the low 40s because of the head injuries and because of the history of injuries. Nothing to do with his play,
Very
other
little
than the fact,
guarantee.
obviously,
Does it peak into the hundreds if we're talking very little guarantee?
As long as there were an out after 3 years where you would not have cap hits, dead money if you have to move on, because if, God forbid, he has 5 more concussions but doesn't want to retire because he wants his money, justifiably so, you just have to protect yourself where if it goes wrong in the next 2 or 3 years because of the injuries or because perhaps he doesn't improve against very good defenses, you have to give yourselves an out. That's why, as Ryan Clark said, this is one of the most difficult negotiations we have seen in the NFL in some time, because you cannot just measure his value and give him a contract based on the pure numbers of the past 2 years. There are other real-life issues that have to be resolved, such as 2 or 3 concussions, being injured every year going back to Alabama except for last season, obviously close and late situations where he didn't play well, obviously against top 10 defenses. Now, I still think he's a good quarterback. I still think he's top 10, but there are extenuating issues here.
You're finding excuses to not give him as money and not compensate him. That here's the problem that I have, and this is an issue that I'm going to address in a Miami Herald column. Chris Greer and this organization has a very nasty reputation amongst their players of not taking care of their own. And this offseason did not help that
with Wilkins and Hunt.
With Wilkins and Hunt and Van Ginkel. And yes, they brought Van Ginkel back the year previously, but let's not pretend like they just, it was a minimum base deal. If the deals don't heavily favor the Miami Dolphins, like Zach Sealer's deal, which looks like right now probably one of the best deals in the NFL, they're not going to do it. And yes, there are exceptions to that rule. Tua will more than likely be an exception to that rule if a deal gets done. But that message is perpetuated amongst the players where they have the perception they will take care of outsiders before they take care of their own. And here we go, the guy who's done everything that you've ever asked, who's been a team leader, he stepped up, he's elevated. You fired a head coach over him. And now you're saying, oh, we don't want to take care of you. We don't want to pay you market value. And you know how players feel about market value.
Yeah, but it's not about reserve. It's about what's in the best interest of the team. That's where you and I differ, and that's where I think I differ with a lot of people who say, pay Tua whatever he wants. Okay, you have to look at your organization and say, what's in our best interest? What protects us if the guy is injured again? How are all of these fans going to feel if, God forbid, Tua is concussed in week 5, then hurts an ankle in week 12, and you're sitting there this offseason without the ability to pursue Dak Prescott or Justin Fields if he's good this year, or Kirk Cousins if he's available, because you already will have committed monster money to Tua long term? Don't you want to leave yourself the flexibility unless you get a very team-friendly deal with Tua? If I'm Stephen Ross, I'm saying that. And I can say that while acknowledging that Tua is a top 10 quarterback, a wonderful young man, and he's had 2 very good seasons. That's not inconsistent in my view.
I want to marry you, but I also want to date other women, is what you're telling me. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't.
I'm just saying I don't need to date other women. I just don't want to commit to you in marriage yet.
Well, Barry, it's either time to poop or get off the pot.
I don't view it that way. It wasn't that time for Lamar Jackson. It wasn't that time for Dak Prescott over the last 2 years. I know, as you said, Prescott got the franchise tag, so it was a hell of a lot of money. I just don't know what the urgency is. Just because other guys are getting it, why does Tua have to feel obligated to get it now? And this passive-aggressive of sitting out some days, not sitting out some days, what's it going to accomplish? I know it's his only recourse. I have no issue with him doing it. I just think it's pointless ultimately. I mean, just sit out or come up with a make-believe injury, which I don't think he would do because he's a high-character guy. But sitting out random 11-on-11s and coming in and giving a handoff, what's being accomplished by any of that?
It's working on his handoff. He's working on his center-to-quarterback exchange. He's working, Barry. Here is my downside. This is where I don't think people understand. Okay, let's just say Tua has a season that's on par with what he's done the last 2 years. Let's say he's forced to play out his 5th-year option and he collects his $23.2 million. Okay. And then you go into the offseason. I know you mentioned the transition tag, and actually one of our colleagues at the Sun Sentinel, Chris Perkins, talked me out of the transition tag because ultimately why would you chance the possibility of possibly losing him? and you need to scare off other competitors. Okay, so the first round picks are what scares off other competitors. If for $10 million, you want to scare off the competitors. That if you do that to me and you make me play on the 5th-year option and then you tag me, I'm not signing a damn thing unless I'm the number 1 highest paid quarterback in the league. And you know where I have you, Barry? You know where I have you as an organization? You can't do a damn thing until I actually sign a multi-year deal, because you are capped out. No matter how you want to strain money from Rob Peter to pay Paul, you're not going to be able to improve your team. And we know that this team has a 2 to 3 year window to win a Super Bowl. And if they don't do it in that time period, it's time to press the reset button. So why not commit? Why not actually propose? Give him a big old diamond ring and say, Tua, will you be our quarterback for 3 years for $44 million a year? We'll give you $120 million in guaranteed money. We love you. We want to support you. If we throw in the no state taxes, that kind of, and I'm not talking about fake money. We could throw all the fake money in the back end and make it look like a $50 million deal, all you'd want. My problem is I don't think $120 million is on the table in guaranteed money.
Yeah, I would doubt it as well. And also, it's clear the Dolphins want out clauses based on the read of this by Mike Tannenbaum and others who have done these types of deals before. And I don't want to hear any criticism of Tannenbaum. We both agree he's a very good analyst. I would agree with you in the point that the leverage shifts to a next offseason because, as you just explained very well, he can hold the Dolphins hostage. He can be at a huge cap number. I don't think he has the leverage now. But what I do think is living in fantasy land that you just said is this. There's no 2 or 3 year championship window. What possibly has happened to make you believe that they can beat Baltimore and Kansas City in a playoff game on the road? Is there? And obviously they won Baltimore last year.
Have to be on the road.
2023. That seems like eons ago. What makes you think there is even a championship window? To me, it's a nice team. It's a team that should be in playoff contention, perhaps a 6th or 7th seed. Maybe if they get lucky against Buffalo and don't screw things up in December, maybe they win a division.
You only got to go through one of those teams, Barry. You only got to go through one of those teams. You never know who's going to get injured. Come on, don't act like Lamar Jackson hasn't missed the end of the season because of an injury. Yes, Patrick Mahomes has been ridiculous healthy throughout his career. At some point, that run's got to end. You never know. You do have this is a good roster. It's an old roster, but it's still a good roster.
It's not a championship roster. Good team, not a championship roster. So I don't think there's any window that they're squandering. I mean, to
address Teron Armstead's point, are they one of the 12 teams that are in the Super Bowl conversation?
Fringes of it. I'd say 10 to 12 probably. I mean, but what evidence can you say that you would say makes them a legitimate Super Bowl contender when they haven't won a playoff game in 24 years? How can you reach that conclusion? I'll give you this, and we both want to see them do well. We both grew up here in South Florida. It's a nice group of people who work for the organization. We'd like to see them do well. But what evidence is there to suggest that this is a team that can go head-to-head with the Baltimore Ravens and their physicality and all of their talent and Kansas City and advance to a Super Bowl when they haven't even won a playoff game yet, and against good teams last year, 1-6, and folded again in December? What evidence is there? So what window is there? I guess their window is to be a good team.
Here's my evidence. They only squandered one game they should have won last year.
Tennessee.
And if they take care of business all year like they did last year, and they actually stay healthy and not be decimated by injuries. Now, do I give injuries as the excuse why you got pummeled by Baltimore? Yes, you lost Xavier Howard on the first play. Yes, you lost some key defensive players in that game. But no, that mentality, Baltimore mentality, they're going to punch you in the mouth. What happens if Anthony Weaver brings that punch you in the mouth mentality here? He said specifically he had other opportunities to become the defensive coordinator. He chose to turn them down because he needed to learn how they were cooking in Baltimore, how they made their dishes with that recipe. And and I'm not saying that I have evidence that this is what's happening, but what's supposed they come in this defense has that punch you in the face mentality. Then, and pair it with the number 1 offense in the NFL and a healthy Tyreek healthy Teron who's had stem cell procedures all offseason to feel younger and to get the fountain of youth. Come on, Barry. You don't
Yeah, it's the
believe?
best case scenario. I mean, best case to me is all of those things happen. They win the division. They're a number 2 seed. Then they just, ideally can win 1 or 2 playoff games for the first time since 2000. And then you have a tough AFC championship game in all likelihood in Baltimore or in Kansas City. I guess outside chance of Cincinnati if Burrow's healthy and they're really good. And then you'll be underdogs in that game. So I get it. That could happen. It's not out of the question. They are on the fringes of relevance with regard to Super Bowl contention. They're a good team, and they're probably going to be a playoff team, although I wouldn't bet any sum of money on that. But I would also counter with this really quickly. You don't have a clear-cut number 3 or number 4 cornerback. You're a Jalen Ramsey injury away from being disastrous at cornerback. Your 2 outside linebackers, both very good players, are coming off major injuries. You have no idea when Bradley Chubb will be himself. You have no idea if Jalen Phillips is going to immediately become what he was before the Achilles injury. You don't know if 37-year-old Calais Campbell is ready to fall off a cliff. You don't know if Tier Tart's going to give you the run stuffing you need, he or Benito Jones in the Raekwon Davis role. So to me, there's so many questions defensively that would give me enough pause to say, if you ask me, you have to say what the Dolphins will be this year. I would say fringe wildcard team. I think they get in as a 6 or 7 seed, but I certainly wouldn't bet any sum of money on that. And that's mostly because of the defensive side of the ball and a little bit of concern about the interior offensive line. But I think to call them a Super Bowl contender is sort of Pollyannish. It's wishful thinking. Yes, it wouldn't be the most stunning thing in the history of Earth if they were in the Super Bowl, but to me, it would be a surprise.
Hey, 49ers shocked the world, made it to the Super Bowl a couple of times in a similar rebuild with the similar offense, and Mike McDaniel knows the recipe. We will see how this pans out. We're not even finished with the first week of training camp. Dolphins In Depth will be here every single day, providing you podcasts every day the Dolphins work. Barry and myself, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow right here, Dolphins In Depth, Miami Herald.